Mhm. Hey, Mama Fern. Oh, my lighting stayed consistent. The sun was nice. Flake me out. The sun is faking me out. Oh. I thought it was giving me enough lighting, and now it's like. You said what? Jesus, I'm scared. I don't want to know. Okay. Okay. I'm going to transition right now. All of this is being recorded, just so you know.
Hey,
Hey, Mama Fern, how you doing?
I'm hanging in there, girl. I'm vertical and I'm happy.
Okay. I'm happy too. I'm happy to see
How
you.
are you?
I'm
Oh, let
good.
me open my curtains because you got sunlight. Let me get some sun in here.
Okay.
And let me get my shake.
Yeah, get set up. I'm about to dig all into your story.
Okay. So, how's it been?
It's been going really well. It's been well.
Good.
Yeah, a good journey. A good journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, in understanding where I am in this journey,
Mm-hmm.
I have to tap into you so much more, and understanding
You got it.
your story, your journey, the history, the culture, all of the things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So first, I just want to say I'm so thankful and grateful for you being here.
Well, look at
Enjoying
you.
the interview with
It's destiny. Thank the ancestors.
me. I say, for sure. For sure. And I am going to do a quick plug and just say thank you to Kia Amin, Julie B. Johnson, Soroya Corbett, and the Dancer Citizen for allowing us to capture this prolific story and then be able to share it with the larger dance community through Dancer Citizens publication.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, Mom, I'm ready to jump in if you are. I got questions. I got all the questions.
I'm ready for you. I think I am.
So yeah, I just want you to tell me a little bit about yourself and your introduction into dance.
Okay.
How did you come into dance? When did you fall in love with it? Is that, simultaneous or a synchronous process, or, how did that evolution happen?
Well, I have to first thank the fates, the ancestors, the spirits, for bringing me into a family that was a mixed family.
Mhm.
My grandfather was Jamaican. My grandmother on my mother's side had a lot of Native American Indian in them. Um, and then in my on my father's side, there was traditional Shebro people, and my grandmother on that side, who I only met like one time when I was very very little. She was the matriarch. She was the really the head of the village,
Mm.
and she was the consort, you know,
Mhm.
to everybody and the mediator. So I know I got some of that from her. Um, so when they met, that even that story of how they met has always been, as I've grown older, more of a flashpoint for me
Mhm.
because here's this very high yellow black woman that in Africa people thought she was white, she meets this beautiful velvet jet black man from Sierra Leone,
Mm.
and at the University of Chicago, and then they left and went to Sierra Leone right after World War II when the German warboats, submarines were still in the Atlantic, and they were the only black people on the ship, on a cargo ship. So very adventurous folk, and so I was born in Sierra Leone
Mm.
and spent the first 13 years of my life there. My
Wow.
father was a minister. Both of them were mission quote missionaries. My father was a minister in the Evangelical United Brethren, which is now the Methodist United Methodist Church. So I grew up, in the Christian ethic, but around me, every morning I was hearing the Muhaddin calling the Muslims to prayer,
Mm.
you know, and I was surrounded by people who were my father was a principal at Fort Bay College, so I was a college brat child, with on one of the oldest campuses in the west coast of Africa. So he was a philosophy major, spoke many languages, and so it was very interesting. This is Sierra Leone independence. So I grew up in an environment where Black people, w- white people were kind of like there, but I was kind of embraced by very strong Black people. And I had an aunt who I thought didn't have any legs or feet because she always wore the grand boo outfits, and she seemed like she was just floating. Every time I saw her, she was just constantly floating around.
Uh-huh.
And so that has stayed with me as an adult,
Mhm.
that image.
Mhm.
So then there were memories of, as I'm writing my memoirs now, there's memories of uh, Boxing Day, which now a lot of that has been messed up with drugs and everything else that's happening all over the world. But when I was in Africa as a child, 13 years there, things were much more delineated. The African traditions were clear, the European traditions were clear.
Mhm.
Now everything's gotten kind of mushy mushy.
Yeah.
But I really remember being on top of my father's shoulders and him taking me off the mountain downtown into Freetown.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, when all of the mass dancers and the musicians came out, and each cohort had their own music and sound and cow horns being blown, and I'm sitting very young on top of his shoulders. That all I'm giving you things that to help you understand why I'm who I am, because
Okay.
these are the ingredients that went into the stew of who I became
Yes,
as an
ma'am.
artist. Um, and so those were memories. And the fact that my father was a minister, but I remember him and my uncle, on Sunday afternoons after church, right? They'd
Mm.
be sitting at my house in the living room in our home up on the mountain, so there's a breeze coming through,
Mm.
and but they'd be drinking beer and eating smoked herrings, and
Okay.
I and joking and clowning and very unministerial. So like I have those memories of the fact that
Mhm.
spirituality and laughter go together.
Okay. Okay.
They go together,
Yes.
and so that was something else. So and then he had an opportunity to go represent he was very much a part of the Sierra Leone planning for in the government for independence. And before that, he went to Israel to represent Sierra Leone at a conference on the health of children. And there's a book that came out that talks about this African man who got up at the conference and talked passionately about the infertility rate of African babies, you
Mm.
know. And that was my dad. And in fact, when on his way back, the plane crashed with 63 people on board and he died. He was only like 47 years old.
Oh, wow.
And and I that whole period of my father dying and in such a shocking way, and then learning later his legacy, and I'll tell you in a minute how that tied into the research that I'm doing now, is that he is very much present in my life,
Okay.
as I've identified more and more. what I want to be and who I wanted to be.
Mm,
He has always boosted me. I definitely know that now for sure. Um, so anyway, that's kind of, and then my mother sent me to an English boarding school in
mm.
Penzance, Cornwall, England. I'll have you know. And I stayed there long enough to have an understanding that I can use access now about what it means to be really be a minority
Mm,
amidst a bunch of white English people in England,
mm,
and to really feel to have to tap into my identity and as a young child, so I could survive some of the cultural brutality that I was faced with in
mhm.
that scenario. Then came to Milwaukee because she had to get a job,
Okay.
and went to uh, Custer High School, where I was again the anomaly.
Mm.
Okay. Because there I had this little afro, which was I was like one of the first Black women to introduce the afro, what we call the freedom cut. You know,
Okay.
that's, people forget, their history. It's like this natural hair was, it couldn't be called just a natural because nobody wanted to say that. But so they associated it because it happens that most of the women who were in the movement had their
Mhm.
hair cut. Odetta and, Nina Simone and all of these people.
Yes, yes, yes.
People weren't into the dread so much at that time. So I got ridiculed. I was an anomaly. I didn't fit in the high school, didn't go to the prom, was just basically, and I had a very thick British, quasi British African accent at the time.
Mhm.
And I worked really hard to lose that because I was ostracized for it so much.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so that gives you the kind of wide span of that period of my life. Um, and I felt I have always been in the I'm looking at this one book, The Life of Colin Turnbull, who was an anthropologist. Actually, it's kind of a weird book, but anyway, the title of it is In the Arms of Africa, right? And I'm
Mhm.
thinking to myself, I have always been in the arms of Africa.
Mm.
And I think that's been our struggle as Black people, is to return back to the arms of Africa, however inconsistent those arms may be at times, and however confusing those arms may be at times.
Mhm.
And this is not to be confused with being with African men, rather than just have to be specific. So that's,
Mhm.
that gives you a little bit of the pre part of what made me.
Uh,
My mother being West Indian, we ate a lot of West Indian, West Indian, African American food. So I
mm,
grew up really appreciating and enjoying all of that. And so I have all of the smells and the sounds of Africa as a child growing up. I have all of that memory is
mm.
there.
Ashe, 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 ashe. Can you talk a little bit about how you came into dance? Um,
Hmm.
and sort of like like your dance training, your predecessors, that sort of space of who you trained and studied with. Because I know just from the little bit that we've talked about that you stand on the shoulders of some giants, and that
Yeah.
connection
Yeah.
and like us documenting and having that history and story is really important to me. But and
Hmm.
to our journey here of dance in the States,
Hmm.
of Black dance in the States.
Yeah. Um, well, I would say that I got turned on to the concept of dance not being separated from music because of being on the shoulders of my dad.
Mhm,
I understood, as a child, I didn't understand, but I understand now how important the music is, or rhythm is, and the sounds, the shuffling of the feet, the agogos, the
mhm,
drums, the singing, the chanting, how all of that is the dance that I know that makes me feel comfortable.
mhm,
Um, so I was turned on to the concept of dance, and my father used to play. I grew up listening to a lot of different kinds of music, and I grew up listening to the scores of class of Broadway shows.
Okay.
So in my mind, in Africa as a little girl, I just knew I was going to be a dancer. At that point of reference, I was going to be a Broadway dancer. I knew I was going to be a singer. I knew I was going to be in the performing arts because that was just who I was as a child. My nickname, traditional nickname, is Yonkoto. And Yonkoto means always messing around. Okay. Never understood what that meant until now.
I was like, how fitting, right? How fitting.
How fitting. How fitting. Yonkoto. There's Yonkoto again. Look at her. You know, so then I would say that I was blessed to be taught to have the experience of a pearl primus. That was my first big thing for me. I was just I was high school, and pearl primus, strangely enough, was brought to Milwaukee
Mm,
um, at the YMCA through the Wisconsin Dance Council, I think it was.
wow.
Um, you can imagine how many years ago that was. And I remember I had just I was just beginning to grow up and feel the beauty inside of me and realize that it was going to be a battle for me to uh, accept how I looked,
Hmm.
you know, as a Black woman. And I walk into this room and there is this big, dark, Black, buxom woman
Hmm.
with bracelets all down her arms and a gele on and a flat nose like mine and big buttocks like mine. And she she slayed me. She just totally slayed me. I was like, who is this woman? You
Hmm.
know, and then after she left, I remember reading about her, looking her up, and and in those days we didn't have like internet, so let's go to the library and dig, and found out who this woman, this Pearl Primus, was, and I said, this is not an accident that I have had this opportunity to. I wish I could have talked to her more, but see, this is the thing people don't realize. If you teach from a place of integrity and honesty, somebody could be in that class that only meets you for that one time.
Hmm.
But that one time, if it's spiritual and purification is there,
Hmm.
you may have totally turned that person around.
Right.
And they may never meet you again. And Pearl Primus did that for me. She
Mm.
is definitely the person that spiked me into going into this as a profession
That's
because I was able to see in her that it was possible.
wow.
Okay. So then, um, down the road, I had a chance. My husband, ex-husband, and my daughter and I we went down to East St. Louis and made an appointment and went in to visit Catherine Dunham in her home.
Mm.
And I remember she was not that well at that time. She was having trouble walking and her hips and everything, but she came down and she didn't hardly speak. She just came down and sat in the living room and said, "How are you?" and told me to tell her my story and blah, blah, blah. Not much of a conversation. She basically kind of stared into space a lot.
Mm.
Okay. Um, but then through the years, I had started studying her and reading all the books about her, and also had an opportunity to go down there when in one of her dance conferences,
Mm.
and that's where I met Morcham,
Okay.
you know, who she had brought from Africa, and he and I developed a long-term friendship. Um, but it was after I had the opportunity to spend a night, a whole night. She stayed at my house, was with Lavinia Williams. And
Mm.
when I realized, I found out that, see, Catherine was on such a high spiritual level of her path as a mambo in the Haitian religion.
Hmm.
She was not as approachable because it's like sitting with a monk. You know what I'm saying? It was like going to visit the Dalai Lama. You know, you don't ex- you don't expect a hee hee ha ha kind of conversation because they're on a whole nother
Hmm.
spiritual plane, right?
Yes,
But
ma'am.
Lavinia was accessible.
Mm.
And Lavinia didn't go, she chose not to become a mambo. Lavinia went into initiation, but she didn't go that far
Okay.
because she wanted to have accessibility to her students at a
Mm.
different kind of a level. Okay.
Mhm.
And Lavinia, we brought her in. I have a tape of her and pictures of her when she joined in with us and did the Yanvalu, you know. Um, she that night, I only had one night with her. We sat up all night at my kitchen table and watched the sun come up. And we talked about not so much the dance. She talked with me about being a woman and matriculating into my womanness and art, and how the art fell and fed that, and
Mm.
how the womanness fed the art.
Ashe.
And she taught me, she told me about the demons that would come after me, you know, the demons that are the demons that don't really know that they're demons, which are the worst and most dangerous kind. You know, the personalities that come after you
Yeah.
because they're threatened by your magnificence,
Mhm.
by your deliciousness, right? By
Yeah.
your integrity and and all of those things. So yeah, so they would come around and try to sabotage you, to lay you down, to, you know, under the guise of many different things,
Mhm.
and turn you off your path. So that experience, you know, was like totally unbelievable. Lavinia had a soft spoken voice, but was incredibly powerful,
Mm.
incredibly powerful. Chief Bay was another one of my teachers, you
Mm.
know,
Mhm.
um, with that rough, dark, deep kind of voice, you know, used to cuss like you know what. Um, Strong, you know, supportive. I remember when I created the all women's drum unit and he came to rehearsal and we played it for him and he says, "Y'all on a whole different place." You know, and it was like, and he said, "Don't let nobody tell you that you can't be no drummers, that you can't this." And then he taught us the baya
Mm.
by the Kikuyu women just to prove, and he said taught this to us in front of the male drummers in the company to support me. He said, "This here I learned from the sisters, the Kikuyu women." And that
Mhm.
I built that into the Wanam K drum orchestra, which I still have in my head, you know, that
Mm.
whole thing that we did. So that the baya rhythm was a African woman's drum. And I remember as a child, the bundu, the women, young girls going into the what we can call Osandi, going into the University of the Forest. Okay,
Mm.
um, and when they would come out, they'd be covered in white clay, hojo, right? And I remember seeing that, you know, the girls coming out when they had finished their training.
Mhm.
And let me tell you, there were no men playing drums; it was women playing drums.
Mm. Wow.
Okay. So I know that there was some kind of cultural, um, what is the word I'm looking for? Cultural hidden thing that brothers went through when they first got their hands on the drums. They went into this whole macho machismo thing that this is the djembe is a man's drum and
Mhm.
women don't drum in Africa and blah. Went through that whole period now. Now that has stopped because it's everybody knows it's not true. But remember, there was a period where the brothers were like that was their domain,
Mhm.
and a lot of people like Chief Bay and all of them were like, "What y'all talking about?" You know, right? So you know that whole experience of women playing drums and my creating, you know, the 9 Wanam K Ngomas, which we premiered in New York, and we were the first all women's drum group to actually appear in New York City as
Okay.
an orchestra. Okay, So, all of that, I think about the Chief Bays, and I think about Yayo Dele Nelson from the Women of the Calabash,
Mm,
who taught me how to play shekere,
mm,
right? Another amazing spirit that people don't talk about a whole lot. She was very, very important
mm.
in the movement. Rhonda Mormon from International African American Ballet, who we're still friends today. John Blandford, you know, um, Wilhelmina Taylor, who is still alive and active in New York. I
Ashe.
mean, these are people who have such a long history, and who, we influenced each other, but they really influenced me because I was just, newly coming up, and I don't believe that I had half the talent that Rhonda Mormon had, and that group that was in the International African American Ballet, they were really exceptional. That you couldn't tell the difference when you saw them on stage from them and Les Ballets Africains. That's
Mm,
how much they did their research. But then they went to Africa every year, you know,
mhm,
and their reason for going to Africa was not to grab and take, you
mm,
know, because now I feel we're in a culture where everybody has to have, because of the internet, there's so much access out there that you can just go onto YouTube and just grab and take,
yeah.
grab, snatch, grab, take, grab, snatch. And then you do that so long that you start to think that what you grabbed was yours.
Right.
And so you end up like propagating something that's actually not yours because you haven't done any of the woodshedding to develop your voice,
Right.
because you're now in the grab, snatch, take culture.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Whereas I'm grateful that when I came up and the people I came up around, we were not grab, catch, snatch people. We
Right.
actually, if we saw something that fascinated us, we wanted to go learn what it was and who and why, you know. And then if we came back and we reformulate, we would reformulate stuff for the American audience, but we always said where it came from
Right.
and who inspired us to do it.
Mhm.
So there you have it. So that's, and I could go on and on and on about other people, but those are the main people that kind of like really. And then there was Alvin Ailey,
Mm.
who I have a letter from, because I
Mm.
wrote to Alvin Ailey when I was young and was getting ready to go to Ghana to study. And I wrote to him how much he inspired me and blah blah blah. And I never expected.
Hold on, Mama. Hold on 1 second. Something's happening with the sound, and I
Okay.
don't want to lose this because this is the good stuff here. Um, okay. I think we sorted it out. It was something going on with the speaker. Let's
Mhm.
see. Okay.
Everything okay? Yeah.
Yes.
So the Alvin Ailey, I did, like I said, I wrote to him as a young dancer, and I didn't expect anything back. And I'd hoped, but I didn't put too much into that. And then the mail came, and then here's this letter from him, handwritten.
Mm.
And I was like, wow. And he says, stick to what you're doing. I think it was handwritten. It's been a minute. I'd have to look at that again. But when I looked, I said, he said, Dear Fern. And then I looked about, I said, Alvin Ailey. Alvin Ailey.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah, I've been blessed with that.
Ashe, Ashe. We are so grateful for your blessings. We really are, because you have paved the way. And so that's some of the stuff that I kind of want to talk about. Though I know a small portion of your story. I do want us to talk a little bit about your history and your journey into going into UWM and
Hmm.
University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And that journey and process. And then, after we kind of dive into that, I would like to talk about your journey into creating Kothi and
Yeah.
legacy
Okay.
as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess it would be interesting to know sort of the timeline of the two, sort of
Mhm.
like which came first, or how did all of that kind of develop?
Well, it really developed simultaneously
Ashe. Okay.
because I was I had just had my daughter in 1971. The company I created in 1969.
Okay.
And I had my daughter in 1971. 1971, 72 semester, I boldly walked into the Department of Africa. The Department of African American Studies is what it was called at the time. It's had new changes now, in terms of what it's called Africology, and
Mhm.
it's many different changes. But I didn't have anything to do with the dance department or anything like that, because my experience in the dance department as a student at UWM was not a good one. I remember being in a ballet class and the ballet instructor telling me that I needed to tuck my tuck in at the bar. And it ended up with my saying to him in front of the whole students, "I'm already tucked. That's my ancestral butt you're talking about." And he didn't know what to do with that answer. I had an afro way out to here, Angela Davis style at that time. And he didn't know what to do with me. And when I said that, I said, "My butt is already tucked, you know." And so I was so incensed, that had such a powerful effect on me, that I literally stormed out of his class. So then that was interesting. And at the time, he was teaching an African dance class as a white instructor, and the class was called Primitive Dance. That
Mm.
should tell you everything, right? So I didn't go to the dance department. I went to the Department of African American Studies, and I said, "I've looked at what you all are teaching here, but you have a major gap and a hole in this process as you teach African and African American history, because you don't have the dance in here." And
Mm.
that is how we as a people communicate ourselves. That's how we celebrate ourselves. So you got all this other stuff going, but there's no movement.
Mhm.
So they said, "Okay, you want to teach a class?" I said, "Sure." They gave me a 3-hour slot at night with no drummer.
Okay.
And I taught that for like 2 years or whatever in the basement of Mitchell Hall. And the
Mm.
class got really big. And and it's just me and a tambourine and a stick. And part of what I taught was some lecture stuff, some informational stuff. Then we'd get up and dance, and then pretty much my format that I use today. Then we'd sit and do assessment and communication. And the dean in letters and fine arts dean happened to be walking through Mitchell Hall in the basement and peeped in and saw this class. So being at that time, well, it still is, numbers are important in terms of your budget. How many
Mhm.
students do you have enrolled? Blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So from a selfish standpoint, he goes into a dean's meeting and says, Where who is this woman teaching in the basement, of Mitchell Hall? Because she's got a huge class. It's a dance class." And so the dean of letters and science and the dean of Peck School of the Arts had a tete-a-tete. And the dean of the Peck School of Arts said, "I want her. She should be in the dance department."
Mm.
So that's how I got into the dance department. And
Ashe.
for 7 years, I taught this beginning African dance class, no tenure track, no nothing. You hear me?
Mhm.
7 years they got from me, and then they decided to put me on tenure track.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. Well, not tenure track. I actually just put me on as full time faculty. Because I was ad hoc or what have you at the time. So
Mhm.
then it started to count. So my first 7 years at UWM weren't even counted.
Wow.
Okie doke. So fast forward, um, I don't have a master's degree. I don't have a PhD in the ivory tower um experience.
Mhm.
However, I know that the ancestors have given me a master's degree and the ancestors have given me a PhD.
Ashe.
How do I know this? Is because actually, yeah, how do I know this? Is because I was put in a situation in an institution where that was the only way you were considered valid.
Mm-hmm.
However, I made sure that I could teach just about everything. Even if they'd handed me a ballet class to teach, I could have taught that.
Mm.
I made sure I could teach composition. I diversified my palette. I read everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I started digging into my own cultural aesthetic and made sure that I could and started developing courses. Okay. Now, soon they realized, oh crap, you know, Fern, this semester, so and so, can you teach this? Sure. And that's how I wiggle my way in to teaching comp 1 and 2,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to teaching, a lot of the courses. And then that's when I developed my own course and said, okay, here, I got a history class because I don't understand what y'all are doing in your dance history class because it doesn't talk about Black people at all. And I'm tired of coming in just when they're going to do the Black thing, and talk about Black dancing is in one semester, one course period time. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's all we got. I said, I got a whole semester's worth of stuff.
Mm.
Okay. And so they said yes. And that's how this whole thing blossomed. Um, then I said, why am I doing all of this work and we don't have a major or sub major or what have you? And that's how the African track kind of grew.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of resistance in
Can you
that
talk about
faculty
that?
during that time. Yeah, none of those people are around now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, whole nother crew of people. I think Simone might have been there at the end of it when we were putting stuff together, but none of those people are there now. And putting the African dance track together. Have you seen it? I think, did I send that to you?
No, I haven't seen it. I haven't.
Okay, okay. I will make sure that I get you the curriculum. It's not complicated or anything, and they still using it because it's on the that's your African dance uh second level African technique class
Mm-hmm.
is inside of the African track module.
Right, right, right.
So
Yeah.
it's still there. Um, so that's, I mean, I had comments made to me like, because I had to write the rationale for why it was done, and I'll send you all of that. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, it was interesting, and I realized these people are threatened.
Mm.
And this is way before this whole woke thing that's going on now and the discussions that are being held now about Black curriculums and
Mm-hmm.
all of this. This is before that. Um, but I knew it's always been there. It's always been there. And we cannot be naive
Mm-hmm.
in our knowingness of the truth of who we are and what our aesthetic is and what our people bring to the front, in terms of the work and
Okay.
the art form. We cannot allow it to be ourselves to be sabotaged, okay? Because you know what? We can't lay sleeping because it is a battle.
Mm-hmm.
It has always been a battle and it will always be a battle.
Mm-hmm.
Because for the world and some people in the world to accept that we have an aesthetic, even though they use it all the time, I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you how many movies I've seen where when the white folks are getting together and singing and dancing with one another and loving on one another, guess what? They use Black music.
Right. Yeah.
And what would modern dance in America be without the Black aesthetic? Hello.
Yes, mama. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
So that's how that whole track thing happened. And then I inserted, it turned out because we do, for some reason, it comes part of our heritage, tend to without knowing it, be the grandmothers wherever we end up, no matter how old you are.
Mm-hmm.
The students started coming to me. So I left my door open in my office. And then the faculty started coming to me when they were having problems. And I said, well, if I'm going to be doing all of this in the faculty meeting, I said, we need a department mediator. I'm going to be it.
Mm.
And I want the title.
Okay.
I want the title. So for a while there, I was the like department mediator,
Mm-hmm.
and actually kept the department from getting into a lot of trouble, and a lot of students getting into a lot of trouble because, breaking it down. It's like, yeah, you mad at such and such teacher, but did you turn in all of your homework assignments? No.
Right.
Right. And
Mhm.
then I would have to confront faculty members, and I mediated between faculty members. And
Mhm.
then I moved up to being a mediator for the Peck School of the Arts,
Oh, wow.
the dance component in the Peck School of the Arts. So I got to see a couple of cases. And then I got moved up to the chancellor's office to work on mediation with some of the faculty issues that were going on that was much more heinous. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, so I learned a lot through that experience. Um, and then I just, at the same time that that was going on, Kothi was flying. Here's
How,
this little African. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm just like, how did Kofi come to be? Like, I want to start at the origin, Mama. Like, how did that
Well,
happen? Yeah.
1969, I had just come back from studying with the National Dance Company in Ghana.
Okay.
And I remember I'd gone to Elmina Castle. And I remember the tour that we went through. And the brother who was giving the tour, he said whenever he was referring to the people who were in the castle and then moved onto the ships and whatever, he would say
Mhm.
they. He never said we. We
Mm,
were. And so it was obvious that somebody else wrote his script, but he didn't identify with the script.
right.
And I ended up going outside, sitting on the beach outside of Elmina Castle and just watching the waves coming in. And
Mhm.
I said, this is, I literally prayed and to the ancestors, and it was like, I feel drawn to being a connector, okay, but I don't know what this means.
Mhm.
I know I love to dance, and I want to help me understand what I'm supposed to do. And it came very clear. Go back home to the United States and use your dance as a means to connect the continent, because I felt that there was ignorance on both sides,
That's right.
okay, about the true story and identification. And that's how Kofi started. I came back and I started working with a group of young people in the basement of a church. And then I'll tell you, the interesting thing about Kofi is that for the first 20 years, 10, 15, 20 years, we never needed to have a booking person because the calls just came in.
Mhm. Mhm.
It was like the door opened, and it went from being a little club to, I remember when I said to myself, and I found that in one of my diaries, this is too much work. This is too much work for it to be a club. And then I remembered all my experiences, and Rod Rogers, Lord have mercy, how could I've left his name out?
No.
Rod Rogers was a major in
Mm.
person that impacted me in understanding that an African African American dance company can be a business and can be run like a business.
That's right. That's
And
right.
he taught me that. And so I put all that together and I was like, oh, okay. So yes, let's turn this thing into a real business. So we're not a folk dance company anymore.
Mhm.
We're not a club. This is going to be a business. We're going to get a board. I'm going to get a board of directors and learned what that was all about. And we're going to get a 501c3, learned what that was all about and how that opened up access to grants, etc.
Mhm.
what a 990 is, and
Right.
why that's important, and
Mm,
quarterly tax reports, and uh, uh, workman's comp. What is all of that?
right.
And the discipline that you have to rise to the occasion of not just coming into the dance studio just because I'm a brilliant dancer and just because I'm the best choreographer on the planet, but if I don't have a business sense, it isn't going to mean anything.
Mm, mhm.
So who's your target? Who do you want to reach? Why do you want to reach them? What is it they need that you can offer? That whole dialogue then
Right.
becomes the marketing strategy and the development strategy and the
Mhm.
da-da-da. And then get people if and then the most important thing is, how did Kothi come about and be 50 plus years now
That's
and
it.
have at one point an $800,000 budget,
Wow.
and now the budget is like $272,000 budget?
Mhm.
Because shit happens, you know, and you got to be able to ride it.
Yeah.
The typhoon comes in and you got to swim like all you got.
Mm,
Hold on to the palm branch, wait for the flood water to go out, and
mhm.
then get back on and start it again. And that's where we are. And we've had a series of those, right?
Sure.
Um, but we've been there to the top of to one of the top, close to the top of the mountain. We know what it is in the 90s to be an international and a national touring entity. I know what it is to have a stall of dancers, 14 of them getting a check 8.5 months out of the year. You
Mhm.
know, I know what that is, and I know how hard that was to sustain, to
Mhm.
the point we couldn't sustain it through the economic crash that happened, right, in the early 2000s. And it's been just trying to just keep our heads a chin up above the water ever since all of that. Some sabotage that we had to survive. And, I don't want to get into all of that, but I can tell you if you're successful, they come in for you.
Mhm. That's it.
So keep your books clean, your head clean, they coming for you. And flashback to my all-nighter with Lavinia Williams. She
Mhm.
told me all about that.
Right.
Okay. So I was ready for it.
That's it. That's it.
And that's how the company came about. And the other thing is, as a choreographer, I looked around and I saw what everybody was doing, but I was also fascinated with, I guess, from being on that beach at Elmina and sitting there and seeing the Atlantic Ocean and realizing what we went through, to go from this point to across the sea. Um, that there was something special in the middle. If you if you went up in the sky and could look down, and you could see what we now call the diaspora, the Middle Passage
Mhm.
and the diaspora. And so I became fascinated with what would happen if an element from here was researched and here was researched and here was researched, and it got put together. And I
Mhm.
was working at the time with a great musician and a thinker. My musical director was Duma Safir, and he was in the same spot of thinking that I was, you know, that there everybody was doing the traditional dances from different places. We didn't need to get in that because we had people already like International Afro American Ballet were really doing a great job. So we ended up with a piece called Juba, which
Mhm.
is what we presented in New York City, and we put them in white tuxedos with
Mhm.
chocolate pants and vests and top
Okay.
hats and white gloves,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
Drummers had on tuxedos with white tennis shoes, kufi hats, right?
Mhm.
And we took the Juba rhythm from Haiti and we put it with DJ Ouba from the Francophone countries, Juba, and
Mhm.
then we linked William Henry Lane, Pat and Juba,
That's
and it was all related. And that became this Juba piece that we did at BAM.
Mm,
And that's what fascinated me about your work, Zakia, because when I saw the work that you submitted in
mm,
your package, I saw you doing that. I saw you kind of being free enough to take from here and take and really be, look, Picasso did it. He was influenced by African art and became known as the father of Cubism, which is a lie. But I'm saying
mhm,
that he literally stole the African cubist way of looking at the human form
mhm.
and form and turned it into his work.
Right.
So why can't we do it?
Yes, ma'am. Understood. As I'm listening to you, I'm like, yep, yep. This is why you said it was destiny, and that why us meeting and connecting was not by chance, because
Mm-mm,
as I'm listening to you talk about that, and especially during that time, right, during that time frame where we've had conversations about it, it's just that, as African Americans, it was this sense or this movement to go ahead and preserve culture and reestablish the connections and links between, us and the folks in the diaspora, whether we're looking at it through a particular lens of either traditional West African or Afro-Cuban or Afro-Brazilian studies. And for me as a being, I'm like, well, I'm influenced by all of it, right? I am a
mhm,
child of the
mhm,
diaspora. And so where do we find the agency to be able to create
mhm,
and pull from all of those resources? And so that has been sort of like, for the lack of a better word, the impetus of my work. And so then to hear
mhm,
and see and witness you doing this, several decades before me is like, yep, this was supposed to be. This is exactly where I was meant to be. This is how it was supposed to happen. Because,
mhm.
I needed this connection and, to understand more, about where I am, especially here in the city, the culture
Mm,
here, what
it's
foundation,
very
what foundation has been laid, right?
mhm,
The
mhm.
sweat equity.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and but I'm not naive enough to think that because sometimes somebody says, well, why did you stay in Milwaukee?
Mhm.
Because I never thought of going anywhere else because there was always a need for me to be here in Milwaukee because sometimes where you stay
Mhm.
and uh, to do your work on one level I've had a certain kind of freedom because I was not in that kind of East Coast New York competitiveness that was going on, which I didn't feel would help me.
Mhm.
I didn't want to be in a battle with other dancers.
Right.
Okay. I didn't, that never crossed my mind that that's where a place I would want to be. The second thing is that sometimes the work that you have to do, most times the work that we have to do in terms of propagating our culture
Mhm.
is being delivered in a community or to people who literally don't know and don't, as a result, sometimes don't even appreciate it.
Mhm.
And but you don't stop because that's the reason you're there.
Yes, that's the
And
chart.
and it's not for everybody, but
Mhm.
that's why I stayed here because a Kothi dance company without, I mean, when I tell you the thousands of people and families that Kofi has influenced, you can go to the grocery store and have on a Kofi t-shirt, and somebody's going to stop you and say, Kofi, my mama used to bring me that. My mama used to go, and or somebody's going to walk up to you at the gas station because you got on a Kofi Dance Company shirt, and they'll say, hey, is Fern still around? You know what I'm saying? It's like I took classes in like 1972
Right.
at such and such a school, and they still remember that.
Mhm.
So you are where you are. How does this thing go? Bloom where? Wait a minute. Hold it. Bloom where you are planted.
Mm. Ashe.
So until you get unplanted and put in a pot someplace else, just bloom there. Be the weed that comes up through the concrete.
Ashe. Yes, ma'am.
And for me, let me say this now so you'll have it on record. I don't want to be a footnote
Mm.
when I am an end note.
Ashe.
See? And what I recognized in you is that you ain't no footnote.
Thank you, Mom.
You are an end note. And at this stage, at 75, I am interested in having around me end notes because that's how the legacy moves on,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Listen, I got so much here. I'm sitting here like I gotta process everything you've just given me, and there's so much more that we're gonna dig into. I really feel like this is gonna become a series. It's gonna become a series of talks with you, Mama. Like, I, we are only starting to scratch the surface here.
Oh, I know.
Um,
And I'm just figuring out myself. That's why it's going to be a funny journey because I literally am. Things are happening every day. There's this there's this African proverb that says, "When an elder dies, a library burns to the ground."
mhm, mhm, mhm.
And
And that
keep
is
that in the front of your mind because one day you're going to be the next elder.
Ashe. Ashe.
When I'm gone, Carrie Amu's already gone.
Mhm,
When I'm 75, most of my peers are gone. Chief
mhm.
Bay, Chuck Davis, Alvin Ailey,
Yeah,
they're gone.
right.
So when I'm gone, you're the next. You and the Demars and all of you guys, you're the next
Yeah.
libraries.
Yes, ma'am. But we still got to collect a lot of your stories. We got some more book writing to do before you go. So we're going to have to schedule
Well,
plenty more of these interviews, and we're going to
you
create a
you
whole series.
you've inspired me um to get back to it because I have to admit that well, it has a lot to do with being gone over the summer, getting COVID.
Mhm,
I'm just really now, COVID kind of wiped out my energy, you
mhm.
know, and we're in the process of reorganizing Kothi a little bit, not a
Okay.
little bit, a lot, because to move past COVID into whatever the funding is going to look like, and these are rough times. Um, just don't put both feet in the water at the same time. There's an African proverb that says, "Do not test the river's depth with both feet."
Mm.
I love these African proverbs because they get straight to the point. Just,
And-
don't test it with both feet.
Yes, ma'am.
And regarding you at the university, I kind of hate this saying that says, God won't give you nothing that you can't handle because sometimes it's like I need to smack God because it's like, don't you see that I can't handle all of this?
Like, can we make it?
Like just for a minute, God, can you like just give me a breath?
Yeah, a little grace, a little grace.
Just a little bit of grace. But I do feel
Mhm,
that whatever is being given you on your plate now,
mhm.
you can handle it, Sakia.
Ashe. Thank you, Mama. Thank you, Mama.
And what you cannot handle, ask for help.
Ashe.
If you don't ask for help, that's when you get into trouble.
Mm. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You look great.
Thank you. You look great too. Look, you look so well. You look so well. That's like we're gonna have to schedule us another dinner date soon.
You
And
have
another
whatever.
another interview soon because again, this is just scratching the surface, and there's so many more things that I would love to dive in and archive right? And so like, that's just a big part of like my passion and my history, is knowing that there are so many living legends here. And how do we preserve those stories, those legacies? How do we document that, archive that work? And so thank you for being willing and open for us to like dig into your history and your story. And I plan to continue to do it. And like I said, this is going to be a whole series. And, you know, I think this could develop into, you know, us inviting, you know, other guests on that, you
Oh,
know,
that's awesome.
that we
We
can.
might be able to do a podcast.
I was like, this could be the beginning of the podcast, and we can bring Mama
Yeah,
Wilhelmina
I
in, and we can start some
that's really
conversations, you know. So yeah,
it's awesome.
I won't take up much more of your time today, but do know it is coming down the pipeline. Um, and we're gonna make sure that we preserve as much of this library as we can.
Yeah. Now what's your all's process? What are you doing in terms of the preserving? So what do you do with the information?
Well, right now, this is just sort of like the jumping off point.
Mhm.
And so this particular interview is going to be archived on the Dancer Citizen, which is an online publication that a colleague of
Oh,
mine,
great.
Dr. Julie B. Johnson, is putting in a special edition along with Dr. Takia Amin and Soraya Corbett. And it's centered around Black women in dance and their stories and
Oh,
journeys. And so it is going to be a really unique, powerful issue because they have a lot of folks contributing in many different formats of essays, of, you
okay.
know, journaling, poetry, you name it. And so, yeah, this will be housed there. And I am going to start gathering my cohort who believes in this work as much as I do, like Maya and Julie,
Yeah.
and sit down and figure out what this can actually look like so that we can move
Well,
forward.
let me know if you want some poetry because I've been writing some about dance specifically
Oh,
too.
I would love some, please, please.
So I should probably send you I'm just making a little note to myself. um I gotta send to you the African track, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And I gotta send you the rationale, and I gotta send to you poems. I got one or two poems I'll send to you just so you can give you some insight.
Yes, ma'am. That would be such a blessing. Such a blessing.
And did you ever see the one that Damar did with me? The interview we did?
No, no,
When you
you
when you
mentioned
when
it.
you huh? I
I
did. When
think
you talked to Damar, next, and he told me he's got you signed up for a master class too, which is great.
Yep, 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 yep. Yes,
Um,
I will talk to him about, yeah, getting that interview. That would be great to watch and see.
yeah, he did a really nice thing. We did it on stage at the it was actually on a stage. It was just him and
Nice.
me, like an interview on a stage.
Beautiful. Yay, I would love to see
Mhm,
it. Yeah, yeah,
mhm.
yeah. Okay.
So that information. So, but are you doing all right now? You doing